Conversations with GIPR, which is the stock symbol for Generation Income Properties, is the only podcast hosted by a CEO of a public net lease REIT. While there is plenty of information and analytical data to help you understand the net lease REIT sector, I take a look at what it takes to grow a company and ask our guests some of the tough questions on how they did the same. If you're interested in learning more about just what you can find in a spreadsheet, Conversations with GIPR may be for you.
David Sobelman is the CEO for Generation Income Properties. All opinions expressed by David or any guest of Conversations with GIPR are solely opinions and do not reflect the opinions of the company. Any remarks in this podcast, other than purely historical information, may include forward-looking statements and as such are subject to the risks and uncertainties that are discussed in our SEC filings, and actual results may vary materially from those suggested in any forward-looking statements. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions.
First, a word from our sponsor, Essential Realty. Is your property essential to the fundamental interests of mankind? Does your tenant serve a need where the global attentiveness of survival counts on your building? Car washes, fast food, coffee, how do we survive without them? Tell us the story of how your net lease building will decimate the existence of man if it doesn't exist. Essential Realty. We let the world know what they need to live. So today I have a very special guest, someone who I've known about 5 years. He has more designations behind his name than I can pronounce. And I would say like a few more designations and you have like a different alphabet, like a different language. But he's extremely respected in his field. What's more important, I'm like looking at Sam here. What's more important is that he has a mission that it literally intends to save the planet. That's not an embellishment. So it's rare that we can get an insider's view of how a building is built and actually why a building is built. And that is something that we don't talk a lot about in real estate and especially at GIPR. So please help me welcome to Conversations with GIPR, Taylor Rao, founder and president of Real Building Consultants. I'm really looking forward to learning something today.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Me too.
This is great. So let's give everyone a little bit of background on how we know each other. Mm-hmm. Just to add some transparency to our relationship, why you're sitting here.
Sure. Right. Well, I think we're coworkers technically.
That's right.
But we were founding members here, and
where's here?
Industrious Tampa, downtown Tampa.
So for those who don't know, we're both sort of frugal. That's the very polite
cost
word.
Effective.
Yes, thank you. And we have found that we don't want to spend a ton of money on overhead. And so we are in a co-working space together. So we see each other almost every day, but we have our own spaces, but we get to interact frequently. Yeah.
I mean, the thing I love about it is I don't really want to have to think about all the stuff that we get here, all the food and toilet paper and coffee. Right. I mean, that's really a lot. That's right. Overhead, not just expense, but just time and effort,
Energy.
Yeah.
Right.
This is the easiest, best deal in town, in my opinion. So.
Okay, so if people haven't looked at your website, your company name is Real Building Consultants, but what I found was interesting is REAL is an acronym.
It was
an acronym.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's all capitalized.
It is.
All right.
Yeah. There's a little story there. So Real Building was actually a different company in 2006. When we founded it with a couple of partners, and REAL did stand for something then. So it was an acronym. There were actually periods between the letters at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And I can talk more about that. But essentially, as I adjusted the business model for what I was particularly focused on, and when I moved on to Real Building Consultants, one of our agreements was that I could keep the name, and I kind of kept the all capitals as well.
The intellectual property.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah, that's great. So do you not want to disclose what it was?
No, I can. Yeah, no, absolutely. So REAL stood for responsible, efficient, attainable living. And we were designing and building homes that were way far and above the greenest homes in the market, if not the region and Southeast, off-grid, rainwater harvesting, gray water harvesting, structurally insulated panels, really, really innovative projects. But they were all single-family residential projects. And in 2008, roughly, during the downturn, we started to get calls from commercial architects and contractors and building owners. And I kind of stubbornly started a consulting practice underneath a design build, a residential design build firm, and grew that business over the next couple of years, and then decided in 2012 to split it off and run with the commercial side of the consulting firm.
I mean, you used a lot of kind of engineering words in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into that,
Yeah.
right? This is where I want to learn a lot today.
Okay.
Most people in professional realms are scared of the word consultant.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard this before.
I mean, I feel the same way in
Yeah.
a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us what you do. Like, why is someone hiring Real Building consultants?
Sure.
And why are you so successful? Because that's like you're an anomaly almost.
Well, we're in an extremely niche market,
Mm-hmm.
the market of environmental stewardship and sustainable real estate development
Mm-hmm.
that is growing significantly over the last 10 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, in 2006, when we said we were going to build a green home, the newspapers and city officials were like, well, what is that? What does that even mean, right?
Right.
And so
is that the paint color? Right.
Yeah. I had lived in San Francisco and Atlanta and traveled around the world and saw kind of what was going on in the markets there
Mm-hmm.
related to energy efficiency, water efficiency,
Mm-hmm.
especially. And my partner kind of saw the same things and said, I want to start a company that's going to address that in the Tampa Bay market.
Mm-hmm.
And so I moved home kind of reluctantly, and we founded the company.
Because you're from here.
I'm from here, born and
Right.
raised here.
Yeah.
Never thought I would move back here.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to be an entrepreneur and start my own business. And this was an opportunity. And I moved back. We started the company in St. Petersburg and kind of created our place in this region
Mm-hmm.
related to green building and
Mm-hmm.
sustainability,
Mm-hmm.
and then just stuck with it,
So you're at a cocktail party. I'm setting you up now. You're
Yeah.
at a cocktail party. You're with like kind of tangential people that you're not really tight with, and you're chit chatting. It's usually at some like school event, right?
Right.
Right. And what is the like stereotypical American question to ask a stranger?
What do you do?
What
Right?
do you do?
Yeah.
Right. Like that's very American.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
What's your name and what do you do?
Right. And so what do you say?
Well, kind of more macro level,
Mm-hmm.
we help building owners and developers and design build teams build their buildings in a more environmentally conscious, efficient way.
Do you get all of that out like right after?
Yeah,
that
I
question's
mean, in
asked? You
different
do?
ways,
Right.
right?
Uh-huh.
And it, depending on our client, we're doing different things for them,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what they care about, what their business model is, and kind of the product type, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we work with their design and construction teams to help them execute the project, earn third-party green building certifications, but within that is a lot of technical services.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of technical services that most architects and engineers don't have in-house,
Mm-hmm.
and contractors don't have necessarily the experience to do it really effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're brought in to kind of be the experts that can supplement each of those teams and help the owner kind of have a third-party set of eyes
Mm-hmm.
on their project to give them kind of more assurance that their goals are being met and that they're building a quality building for their stakeholders, for their business model, for the person that's going to buy that building from them.
Do you ever fight with the architect?
Fight's a tough word. I would say
It is a tough word.
Yeah, we work with them, and
Uh-huh.
we always try to understand what the intent of the design is, and we want to
Mhm.
respect their design
Mhm.
and work with them to make that design better.
Mhm.
And most of the time, we do say like, we're not here to change
Mhm.
the design of your building.
Right.
We're here to make it better. We're here to offer ideas. And
Is that offensive to say we're here to make it better? I'm naively asking. that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it might be in some
Right.
ways. And
Yeah.
we definitely, every now and again we'll hear some pushback, but it comes from a good place. And
Just so our listeners know,
Yeah.
Taylor is literally one of the most polite people ever. Right.
I try to be. I try to be.
Right.
I think that architects care a lot, and that their design is kind of their work
Sure.
product. And so we try to work with them and just improve it. not from the standpoint of it's going to look better, but it's going to perform better. And that's really what it's about.
And what's their feedback for you? Because I know stereotypically, and that's always usually a negative,
Right.
An architect wants complete ownership of their, using your words, work product. How do you go into that conversation and kind of help influence not their design, but the way that they're building it? Because I don't think a lot of people know that an architect will sometimes pick materials, right? Move walls, have an understanding of the site plan specifically, so they know where to put the building. And then you come in and you may want to alter some and or all of what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think usually we're getting involved in the project very early before those decisions are even made. And so we try to set the project up for success and kind of give everyone the guide rails of, what the owner's intending to achieve with the project, what their desires are, how they're going to operate the building. So then the architect and the engineers that work under the architect typically can kind of do their work in a more thoughtful way. And so it's not about you are going to design a bad building and we're going to make it good. It's more about let's all work together. Let's integrate sustainability and energy efficiency, water efficiency, health, et cetera, into the building from the start as an integrated team. And so we're just we're a team member of the project. And we try to be pretty fair with everyone, whether we're typically working for the owner. A lot of times we will work for the architect, but whoever we're working for, we're pretty neutral in that. We're not throwing around like, hey, I work for the owner and I'm going to make decisions for the owner. It's more of let's all work together for the best outcome.
That's called Switzerland.
Yes.
Yeah.
Try to be Switzerland.
So I would say that the vast majority of people who are not in your industry, specific industry, but maybe in real estate in whatever capacity, struggle with the cost benefits of the additional investment they have to make into the green construction of their building. And later I want to get into specific examples. But first I want to talk about economics.
Yep.
And that's really challenging in some ways because doesn't it ultimately just cost less not to build a green building?
Well, it depends on what cost you're looking at, right?
This is what I want to hear from you.
Yeah,
good.
And my background actually, I majored in business in college. So we and I have an international business master's degree, and so when I came to the Tampa market, that was something that always came up, right? It's going to cost more, right? And so it's like, well, what are you looking at? Are you looking at the first cost, or are you looking at the lifetime cost of the project? And we worked locally. A great example is a really well-known nonprofit in this market that had allowed their design team to value engineer the building to save on first cost. They were trying to be responsible stewards with the donors' money.
And first cost, I need to educate myself.
Sure.
First cost means like
the development cost.
Okay.
Yeah. What is it going to cost to build this building? What's the first cost to deliver this building?
In a more traditional way. Is that a good way to say it?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right.
But what we try to do is help the client understand they also have to factor in their operational costs. And so in that particular instance, we were brought in very late and it was under construction actually, and they had a reason to bring us in and help. And we said, well, you've cut out all of your energy efficiency. That's how you were saving money on your first cost. And over the next 50 years, 100 years that you own this building, you're going to be paying for that savings in higher utility costs. And the light bulb kind of goes off where it's, hey, we're paying the utility bill too. And it's easier for us to raise money for capital projects, building buildings, et cetera, as a nonprofit, than it is for us to raise money to cover our operational costs.
Interesting.
And so they looked at it and said, you're right. If we can save money on our operational costs, we should spend a little bit of money up front. And usually we do that analysis in the design stage where we look at the return on investment. What does that decision do to our operating costs? And then the client will tell us, we have a 5-year payback horizon or a 3-year or a 10-year. It just depends on the client. And I think it's one reason why we typically are working with clients that are going to own the building for a longer period of time because they're going to realize those savings.
That's a great point. So at our company, we underwrite the investment from day one, but also into the future. And we're conservative underwriters. And so we make sure that we're taking into account worst case scenarios. And I would say that it's hard for us to pro forma value beyond 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's probably a good number. We know within a fairly small window of what the value of that asset would be based on an infinite number of variables within a 10-year period. Beyond that, we're kind of guessing.
Sure.
I'm sure there's some regression analysis where we can figure out what it is,
right.
but it's still guessing. You seem to be accurately quantifying operational costs for a period of time. Is it indefinitely, or to understand the costs that go into that building? Is that a true statement?
Yeah, so on our team, we have engineers that do energy models that are very sophisticated modeling. So when you're building a code building, you might do a more simplistic analysis just to show that you meet the building code. We're doing whole building energy analysis that runs the building through an actual weather model of the actual location of the building to estimate what your utility consumption is going to be on a granular level.
At that one specific location.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So we take the building at whatever stage of design, and we actually build a model that's based on that actual design. We put it on the actual site. We run it through an actual weather pattern, and we estimate the annual cost of utilities to the day, week, month, year. And then you can factor in, well, you know what your utility rates are today. You know that they're generally rising over time. So we actually can build that in as well and say, how much is this saving me every year? And then based on the first cost of some of the efficiency decisions, we can kind of dial it in and find the right ROI for the client based on obviously their project budget, but also on their horizon, their timeline of ownership.
I love that. See, I learned something.
Yeah.
Something meaningful, that it's very specific,
Yes.
not only to the industry but to that specific site. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I mean, the variable is always right. You can design the most efficient building and the model can show everything, but we're only as good as the people that are in that building, right? And so if you design a super efficient building, but you open the windows every day and you turn the AC down to 60 degrees,
right,
and we didn't model for that, we're not going to be right? So we make a lot of assumptions based on occupancy pattern, based on settings in the building and our understanding of how things are going to work. But as we always know, like things don't always work the way they're supposed to. People operate the building differently. COVID happens, whatever it might be, and so we're trying to make a lot of assumptions that are as accurate as possible given the information we have.
I remember reading a book about Frank Lloyd Wright one time, the architect, and he used to go, when he was engaged to design a house for someone, he used to go to that person's house prior to building their new home and live in their house for a week with them. And so he could figure out how they live, and then he would design the house.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're doing that.
We try to.
Yeah.
And it's only as good as the information that we have, right? And as the owners that own a lot of buildings, they're very good at understanding what they need and how they're going to operate. And we try to bring the facilities maintenance team into the design stage of the project so that they can tell us what they want to see at the end of the day.
I literally have never heard that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. We try to bring them in very early so that we develop things like an owner's project requirements that actually says, we like this kind of equipment. We don't like that kind of equipment. Here's how we're going to operate it. Here's who's going to operate it. We'll bring them in at different stages during construction so they can see where the stuff is behind all the walls so that when they actually have to maintain these things, they kind of know where they are. They have familiarity. And we're kind of working with them, especially through our commissioning team, when we're commissioning all the building systems to make sure that they're installed correctly, operating correctly. We want the facilities guy to be a part of that process so he is aware of access points and how this system is supposed to work, where the controls are, what is it connected to, all that kind of stuff.
Is there an inflection point in the Excel model that shows where the cost benefits start really working for the building owner?
Well, again, I think it goes back to the first cost analysis is, there's a cost of every piece of material and equipment you put in the building, but then, how efficient is it from day one? And now what we're seeing is that owners are really demanding, they have carbon reduction goals, they have other goals. So there's day one benefits to having a third-party certified green building from The operational side, obviously, you got to get through those multiple years of savings to realize your full ROI. And then you have basically, you're saving that money after the initial investment's paid off. So I think there's an interesting, we kind of say sometimes you're paying for energy efficiency. You're either paying for it up front or you're paying the utility bill. You're paying a higher utility bill over time. And so either way, you're paying for your decision at this point.
I read a book one time that was talking about how electric vehicles are in kind of more prominent in different parts of the world, mainly because those parts of the world want them. Like that's the trigger. So there's parts of Europe that will be all electric cars soon. I think China's electric car production is drastically higher than the United States.
Yep.
And the United States has like 1 or 2% of their vehicles, and they're super expensive. And, there's not a lot of chargers around. And it's because Americans haven't embraced that. And I'm sure at the beginning of your career, and you're saying, I want to build green buildings, everyone's like, well, that's a very nice mission.
Right.
I appreciate you looking out for the globe. But now there seems to be a true financial reason to do it. And it sounds like that's what you're speaking to more.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's always been a financial reason to do it. I think that the cost of doing it, depending on what you're doing, has come down some. But back to the idea that it costs more, I disagree with that in a lot of ways. I think, yes, it costs more to cover your roof and solar panels than not doing that. Not that that makes your building green either, right? The first few homes we built didn't even have solar on them, and we offered tours of these homes so people could check them out. And they're like, well, where's the solar panels? And we're like, we designed a really efficient envelope. We don't need solar. We could add solar if we wanted to. So that's not what I'm saying makes a green building. But, there's a cost for putting in more innovative energy efficiency systems. And there's a return with that too. So usually the higher cost items come with a return. And so that's where we use our modeling tools and our experience to justify. But we do a lot of projects that otherwise would be quote unquote code built buildings that we do make better through better materials and better construction management practices, et cetera, that does not add a significant cost to the project. Like I said, nonprofits are doing it. Affordable housing developments are doing it. We've worked with some national food, chains. These are cost-conscious developers, cost-conscious building owners, and they're able to do it. So when we get the high-end Class A office building or the large condo tower that's selling multi-million-dollar condos, it's like if they can do it, so can you.
I'm so glad you brought up office buildings. That was something I wanted to talk to you about because I think people who are not specifically in real estate and specifically commercial real estate, they even know that an office building could be LEED certified and that at different levels. And that's like important for several reasons. But that's not all you work on. There are so many other types of projects and commercial buildings. Could you speak to that some?
Yeah, I think, we do a lot of multifamily. We do a lot of mixed use kind of projects. We're getting more into hospitality and healthcare. Office is a part of our business, but I think we usually are doing more institutional office, meaning university work, et cetera. So kind of classroom offices, those kinds of buildings. But yeah, it's across the board. We try to stay as diverse as we can in terms of our product mix. I think it makes it more fun to not just be like the office team or something. I love office projects. I actually love interior build out projects, where someone's built an office building and a tenant's coming in and fitting out their space. And we dabble in residential, single family residential here or there, depending on, the level of complexity of the project team, et cetera. But yeah, we try to stay as diverse as we can across the product types in real estate.
So you know what we do. We buy net lease single tenant buildings.
Right.
I'm simplifying what we do, but that's what we do. And most of what's built for these tenants is built by a developer. And the developer has a cost to construct that building, and they derive the tenant's rent based on the costs And so there's a percentage of rent, that goes into whatever the cost is of that building. Their intent, typically from a new construction perspective, is to have their costs as low as possible because they're not going to own that building forever. In a very traditional sense. They're going to build it in order to sell it and make a profit. They should make a profit. I'm saying that to our listeners. That's important that they make a profit so they can go on and continue to build these buildings. However, have you ever experienced a tenant on kind of a programmatic basis say, we need green buildings for all of our new construction or most of our new construction?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's been the biggest trend, I think, over the last 5 years versus my first 10 is that the tenants are demanding it. Not only the tenants, but the safe money is demanding it. So insurance pension funds and sovereign wealth funds and big private equity corporate type investors that are buying, they're the second guy to buy the project. They're using third-party certifications as a way to validate the quality of the building. They're a lot smarter. There's a lot more data available. And these metrics are important, but also the third-party certification gives them a very clean answer to, does this building fit within our ESG profile? Does this building meet our carbon reduction goals? Is there a level of quality? Is there a level of review done during the design and construction process to give us some more assurance that what we're getting is a high quality building? And unfortunately, that wasn't always the case.
For sure.
And so you can have someone come in and inspect your building, but they're not seeing behind the walls, right? Unless you're asking them to rip it up. They're not understanding of, how it was designed, how it was built, other than what they can get an inspector to tell them. Going through a third-party certification, especially more rigorous ones like LEED, gives them that third-party documentation that they can almost ask for everything and get all the data they need on how this building was designed, how it was built, any problems that arose during construction, how efficient it should be from energy and water, what kinds of materials are in it, et cetera. So you're getting a lot more granular data because you collected it versus asking for it after the fact and the developer doesn't know anything and it's going to be really hard to get.
So help me understand some of the financial aspects of building ownership, green building ownership. And I'll set up a for example for you. So if someone is demanding a green building in their portfolio or their entire portfolio, you mentioned ESG. For those listeners, those are environmental, social, and governance. And you fit into kind of all of those, right?
Yes.
Right. How would the economics of that second building owner benefit them? Wouldn't it solely benefit the tenants?
So it depends on how you look at it. If you're talking about the first, and I agree with you, everyone should make a profit if they deserve a profit, right? But I think there's something that people are talking about now in terms of the opportunity cost of not doing the third-party green building system, certification. In a world where we know that demand is picking up and that the higher quality investors are asking for third-party certification, if you don't do it, you're risking losing the highest quality money for your project, right?
So there is a quantifiable increased value for having that certification.
If you have less buyers, if your buyer pool is lower because you didn't do it, and therefore you'll have less demand, right? And so there's a lot of data that shows that LEED certified buildings and third-party certified green buildings demand higher rents. They sell at a higher rate, and it all comes down to the competition in the market. So if you go to the bigger cities around the US, that's 100%. You have to do LEED certification to be considered a Class A building. And in our market, it's not necessarily so. But that is getting more and more momentum. And that's been really the fun thing that, again, back in 2006, we thought would happen here.
Right.
We knew it was going to happen 10 years, 20 years after Atlanta and 30 years after San Francisco. But we're kind of in the middle of it now.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And what about the tenants themselves? Talk about how they look at their occupancy, not just from a cost perspective, but are there any, I'm being selfish here for a moment.
Sure.
Are there any single tenant building tenants who are demanding green construction?
Great example. Obviously, I spoke last week at the University of Tampa, and they've celebrated their 10th LEED certified project, which we've been fortunate to work on every one of those projects.
Right.
And President Vaughn was very sharp early 14 years ago. The students were asking about environmental stewardship on campus, right? The ultimate stakeholder. Right. These aren't people that you're paying to come there. These are people that are paying you.
Kids are so smart.
Right.
Now. They're so much smarter than we were.
And so they were asking all of the questions about recycling, about health, about environmental stewardship. And so they started to use third-party certifications as a way to validate and share with their students how they were committed to environmental stewardship, how they were committed to carbon reduction, et cetera. So that's one great example.
Yeah.
Another one is that, especially now when you're talking about employees, the younger employees especially, they get they have an environmental consciousness that is over and above any other stakeholder in the market right now. And so they're asking and they're looking, am I going to work for a company that cares about the environment? Am I going to work for a company that is detrimental to the environment? Are they acknowledging that, and are they trying to improve, and can I be a part of that improvement? So that's one, right? They want to work for a company that cares. And third-party certification, I think, is a really easy way to show that the spaces these people are working in have a level of consciousness and responsibility,
For
right?
sure.
And then it gets into, am I healthy? Am I in a healthy work environment, right? So talk about building health and things that factor in access to daylight, access to views, healthy materials, reducing VOCs, volatile organic compounds.
Yeah,
So like,
don't expect that I know anything that you're going to say.
Sure,
right?
sure. The off-gassing of chemicals from certain products, right? And so that we spend 90% of our time indoors, more or less.
Right.
And a lot of times, if you're not doing, if you're not looking at these things, indoor air quality can be worse than outdoor air quality. And so if you're spending 90% of your time indoors, you're actually breathing more unhealthy air than if you were outdoors.
You should have led with that.
Yes.
that should have been like your tagline.
Right. Yeah. I'm working on my sales pitch 15 years later, right? But yeah, those are things that people really are getting to understand more and more. And so our team looks at every material that goes into these projects and makes comments on, do they meet the low VOC requirements? Are they healthy? Are they responsibly manufactured? Do they transparently report, how they extract, manufacture, transport, all of those kinds of things, the components of those materials. And so again, the transparency and the granular data that is available is really helpful. And it's also very dangerous in a way, because if clients are asking you to give this information to them and you don't have it, they're on to the next deal.
That's right.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to get very specific to what we do. So we've said single tenant, at least one tenant. Some tenants, some companies literally have thousands of locations, tens of thousands of locations, usually smaller buildings. They're maybe 2,000 to, 10,000 square feet or so, something like that. And they have thousands of them. And you have been part of one concept, one company that has a building of the future. Do you know what I'm referencing?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'll say we worked for a quick service restaurant chain that.
It's on your website. Like, you just got to say it.
Sure. Yeah. Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay.
Dunkin' Brands. And we were brought in to do their store of the future in St. Petersburg, Florida, which actually was the location of their first LEED certified project. But we were actually working on their second in their entire chain.
Is that shocking to you? Like, when was that first one built?
I think it was around 2008, 9 timeframe.
So now it's taken them 16 years to do number two.
Well, no, this was number two was in 2000 and maybe 11, something like that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I confused that.
No, yeah.
Okay. So 2008, they built the store of the future, which is inclusive of what?
We looked at everything for that project, and going back to the cost-effective kind of analysis, there was a great construction manager that was really innovative and wanted to push the envelope, and we were there to kind of help him do that. And we did things like rainwater harvesting for their irrigation. So we collect rainwater. It's right next to the drive-through with a sign on it. You can learn all about rainwater harvesting.
Really?
Yeah, and we offset all the irrigation demand from our rainwater system and from.
So they have no sprinklers on the property.
They have sprinklers, but it's all fed by rainwater.
Oh.
Yeah, so we store the rainwater and it all goes out there. A lot of daylighting and lighting controls, and they were actually one of the first stores to test the sinks that have the hand wash soap dryer all in one, which isn't necessarily a sustainability thing. I could argue that it is in a way, but just trying to do new things. And so every so often they're putting out their new store designs, et cetera. Right. We did EV charging there, a lot of material related benefits. All the appliances and water systems are as efficient as they can be. That's a LEED Gold project that was really fun to work on. There's actually also an art installation. So they engaged with the community and offered an area to provide art. So that might be more of the social side of the ESG, right? But they learned a lot through that project. And then we went on to actually help them develop their internal green building standard, which is called DD Green. Okay. And that is more of an independent standard that they can utilize for their concept on any project. All their franchisees have access to it. And it kind of helps them, they give them the brand standards, they give them their prototypical designs, and then they give them the DD Green options that say, hey, if you want to go over and above, here are the ideas that, are brand aligned, that we vetted, that we have kind of a playbook for you to execute in hopes that more franchisees will choose to do that. I think now there's been 700, probably more like 800 stores that have been built to the DD Green standard. And I think it's been one of the most successful programs for them in terms of something that was developed in-house, that was rolled out and has now continued on for 10 years.
How many sites do you think they have that are that are LEED certified?
LEED certified, it's a handful, I believe. Yeah, maybe 10.
And so now they have 10 to 16 years of data to back test this thesis. Have you kept in touch with them at all?
Not as much lately, but the interesting thing was that we really engaged with everyone up and down their stakeholder group. So their architects, their construction managers, the contractors that they preferably work with in different markets. We actually visited a lot of different stores. So we did a ton of engagement to figure out what does the franchisee care about? What is a pain point for all the design and construction team members? What works, what doesn't? And then obviously, what does the brand care about? And so I think that's an ever evolving thing. And I know that they have continued to do their best. One of the big ones is that they've stopped using styrofoam for their cups. And that was always something that was brought up as part of their environmental stewardship. Sure. So I know that they're continuing down that road. We haven't been as in touch lately, but we have a great relationship with them.
Do you think that a company like Dunkin' Donuts or similar, thousands of locations sort of brand will ever demand that their new construction solely be green?
Well, I mean, not to stay in coffee too long, but Starbucks, I think every single one of their stores pretty much is a LEED certified store through. They have a prototypical standard. But yes, I think that's happening. A lot of bank branches, right? Our large banks are doing this for their branches. I think there's a lot of different third-party standards, and it's not just LEED, but LEED is probably the prominent one that the market understands the best internationally. But I think that, yes, that it's going back to how do I validate that what I'm doing is green, is environmentally responsible, is reducing carbon. And it just depends on the brand, but I think we see the trend getting stronger and stronger, and the brands are really latching on to, buildings account for 40+% of the overall global emissions. If you add in transportation, that's 60% of our global emissions. And so I get really passionate about transportation as much as I do buildings, which is weird, but where you build the building affects the transportation, right? And it affects how much emissions are involved in you just getting to that building. Right. And one thing I always say is we can design the greenest building in the world, but if you walk out the front door and get hit by a car because our streets are unsafe, that's not very sustainable. So
I'm sorry to laugh, but that's true.
No, yeah. And so it's really something that I'm very and going back to why I got into what I did is I got really passionate about the kind of communities that I want to live in, and how development happens, where it happens, and all of those things affect our overall global carbon emissions, and those percentages factor in the materiality of the buildings as well. Concrete's really bad for the environment. So we do a lot of work now on life cycle analysis to help clients analyze their concrete mix designs or just all of the materials they're putting in their buildings and finding better options that might reduce it just a little bit. 10, 20% even. But that's a meaningful amount of emissions that they're reducing just by picking a different product.
And especially over time.
Yeah.
Right. So we're big on culture. We're big on values. And it's like so easy to see like you have great values. Like every day you're looking to make something better for a lot of people all at one time. How do you discuss culture and value? Because you have one of the most like accomplished teams that there are. They're all like super smart and kind, and
that's very kind of you to say that.
And they're doing good work, and that comes from leadership and the culture and values in which you instill into the company. So how do you speak to that when you're discussing real?
I think, as you know, like you have to have a great team around you, right? You can't do it all. And, you lead by example as much as you can. I think we probably talk less about our culture and more just act as our culture, if that makes sense. And so, I think one thing is we all work very closely together. Our projects are very complex and have a lot of different disciplines on our team that, have to constantly work together. Our role on a project is really more like a project manager, more than a specific discipline, right? Because we're working with all of these different disciplines. So the most important thing to us is that we can just exist and work together and have fun doing it and be able to have conversations. And sometimes they're tough conversations and we challenge each other. But I think it's important to not be kind of the one kind of looking over everyone's shoulder. So there's a level of trust and a level of kind of understanding that everyone's going to carry their own weight. One of the things that I think is probably the most cultural thing, if you ask our employees, is something I call sweeping the floors, which is, are you willing to sweep the floor? That's not your job, but if there's dirt in the middle of the office, are you going to pick up that broom and sweep, right? And we all have to do those things. We all have to have experience in the things that we're doing so that we can teach the next person how to do it. Because I found that if you are trying to teach someone something that you've never done, it's very hard to get them to really learn it and really latch on to, this is something that, my boss won't do. And now I'm having to do it. It doesn't make it very fun, right?
That's exactly right. Tell me, talking about sweeping floors, tell me what you don't like about your efforts.
I think there's a lot to like about it, right? And the thing I really...
That wasn't the question.
No, I know. Yeah. I think what I don't like is that sometimes it is hard to get through to teams about the benefits of what we're doing. And so
external teams.
Yes, right. And so when we're working with a design and construction team, they have their processes, they have their way of doing things. And that's understandable. But we're trying to do things a little bit differently. And I think the market can sometimes kind of latch onto this efficiency of work product that does not necessarily yield the best result. And so we're challenging those efficiencies, right? So this is how we set up a plan set. This is the specs that we put together. This is, how we what we put into the building. And if we're asking them to do something a little bit different, what I don't like is when it becomes combative, right? And it usually does not. And we do a really good job again of being very collaborative. And
I don't see you arguing with anyone.
Yeah, we can. It gets heated sometimes, right? Because you're stressed. You're trying to complete a design by a certain period of time. You're trying to deliver a building by a certain period of time, and there's problems, and you have to address the problem.
Always problems.
Yeah,
right.
And you have to address the problem. You can't just rush past it. It's going to come back sooner or later. So when we're doing building commissioning, when we find a problem. Yes, it's going to slow the project down, but guess what? That problem's going to get worse over time. And if you cover it up with drywall and don't address it, it's going to be even worse because now you're going to have to tear your building apart to fix it. And so we try to get ahead of all of these potential problems as much as possible. But that's the fun thing about what we do is it's different every time. It's a challenging, kind of environment where you're doing something new. Nobody wants the same building over and over and over typically. Right. And so everything you're doing is new. The materials are new. The design concepts are new. The equipment is new. And so you have to work with all of these new things and new ideas and make them operate efficiently and correctly. And so we're kind of just constantly working through challenges that are big and small and helping smooth them out as much as possible.
Where do you see the green building industry going in the near and medium terms? Like what's something that we haven't the lay person hasn't read about recently?
I think the biggest, most interesting thing going on is the idea of prefabrication. The idea that systems in a building can be built off-site in a controlled environment with the best materials and brought to site and installed very quickly. So you're reducing your time on site, you're reducing all the labor on site. And you also can control your inputs much better. So you're able to reduce waste. You're able to reduce noise pollution based on construction. You're able to build a building quicker. So I think there's the speed of that, and obviously the labor demand of that gives the worker a better place to work. They can stand up and work at standing height versus bending down. They don't have to deal with the environment, sun exposure, water, whatever it might be. And I think that's really, really interesting. We're doing a project right now that all of the bathrooms in the building, it's a huge residential building, are being pre-built off-site, and they're delivered in pods and placed in service, basically wrapped in shrink wrap. And then they'll put them in place, and then they'll open them up. Once everything's done, they'll just connect the water and the electric, and you got a finished bathroom. Wow. So I think that's really unique from a transportation emission standpoint, from a materiality, sustainability, and from a level of quality control. And then also back to the S again, the actual labor.
Is 3D printing part of, you're not a believer?
I think it's very niche. Yeah. I'm excited to see that happen. And I think it's very far out. Okay. Personally.
All right. Yeah. It's less nice, right?
There's just limitations, I think, with, and I'm not an expert on that, but I think there's limitations to it.
Taylor, this has been so interesting. I knew I was going to learn something today.
Good.
Yeah, I think green building has just been, in my world, I'm speaking very selfishly right now, a secondary, even tertiary topic, because everyone really struggles to figure out how to make money with it. We're essentially a high finance, for lack of a better phrase, sort of company that happens to buy buildings. And rarely do we talk about the cost benefits, the cost efficiencies, using your original words, in green building. And I think you very clearly outlined the trend that is going there, because that Excel spreadsheet is really meaningful to most people. The social aspects, the ESG aspects, have kind of crept up on us. We're a NASDAQ company, so we're kind of required, which is just terrible that they require it, because we're already doing it all. Right. So the fact that we're being told to do something that we're already doing, isn't wonderful. And I'm sure a lot of companies have some sort of animosity towards that, but you're finding a way to make it financially beneficial to all parties.
We try.
Yeah.
We try. And I mean, you, of all people I know, you appreciate value, right? And I think sometimes it gives you that leg up, right? And that's kind of the secret sauce that most of our clients have found, that it doesn't cost as much as they thought it would. Right. It results in a better product, and now they are a differentiated product in the market. And that's good for business.
This is great. Yeah. Taylor, thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.